I wish I could play Persona 5 for the first time. Again. Hi, my name is James, your certified dream girl. Back in good old 2017, there was a game that came out called Persona 5, and it was a long awaited game that so many people probably lost hope for at some point, but eventually did come out years after its initial release date, if you will. And basically all of the hype from Persona 4 Golden and Persona 4 and 3 and all that stuff, I mean, who wouldn't be excited for what Atlas was cooking up in their little dungeon? Or, I'm sure they have great working conditions, But I remember this game being something I'd never heard of before, and I had never had any Persona knowledge prior to Persona 5. Let me paint you a picture. Back in 2018 to 2019, I was a freshly graduated girly pop. I was just working, as anybody does, pre-pandemic, pre-all of that. And essentially, I was looking for a new game to play. I had no new games. I had finished Breath of the Wild, and I needed something fresh. My brother and I were roommates at the time, and he had a PS4. So obviously I could play PS4 games. Prior to this, I only had Nintendo systems, so I was mad playing like Fire Emblem games, was playing all of every other JRPG you could play on your, 3DS. And when the Switch came out, there were not that many games yet, so it was time. I was researching games, and on every single JRPG or RPG list, I saw two games in particular, Nier Automata and Persona 5. Obviously, I had no knowledge of either of these games. My brother had no idea what these games were, and he knows almost everything about games. Or so I thought. And this is where things get interesting, right? From that point, I decided, based off of the video reviews I was watching, the best option for me would obviously be Nier Automata. That's right, I got Nier Automata. So, I played it and I booted it up, and I gotta tell ya, I wasn't feeling it. It was, I don't know. There was nothing wrong with the game. I remember getting extremely confused and losing my way and not even knowing where the heck I was supposed to go for my next objective. I think the map and the quest system was just really confusing to me at the time, and I just felt like my fear of robots was also an issue. That's right, I have a slight fear of robots. It has been better over the years, but this is the exact reason why I haven't played Horizon Zero Dawn. It's such a stupid thing to say, but I think Nier Automata eventually did help me conquer that fear, but alas, 18, 19-year-old me was not super jazzed about this game yet. The theme of the game was also more mellow. It had a more dramatic and more of a depressing type of vibe because, there are no humans, it's the end of the world. So my piqued interest was not there. So then I decided to return the game and go ahead and get Persona 5. So I return the game, I get Persona 5 back, and this game, holy cannoli, it knocked and rocked and boogied my socks off. I didn't know anything, right? When you play a Persona game for the first time, you don't know anything. Like, you watch a review, you think, anime school, this is my, isekai moment where I'm, a high school student and living the high school life, like that's what you think. Plus magic? Question mark? We don't know. And so playing the game, I was like, whoa. Everything had style. And that opening sequence was the most beautiful opening sequence. Wow. And it makes a lot of sense because the direction for the opening sequence was created by the same person, I think, who animated, or maybe it was the studio that animated for Yuri on Ice, which is why it looks so beautiful. And I just loved the whole vibe. Starting the game, the opening sequence, the menu, everything. And then starting the game with the way that it just like crashes in with Joker and he's on this heist and you don't know who's talking, you don't know who's gonna, spoiler warning, betray you, you know, like everything's just a mystery. And to be honest, having played Persona 5 Royal now and having played Persona 5, I will say I miss a couple things that Persona 5 did at the beginning of the sequence of the game, because I think the mystery of it was there more so than it is in the Royal version. But maybe they, you know, felt differently on the developer side, whatever. Boot up this game, get into it, right? Turn-based combat. Already know what this is about to be. If you're familiar with, you know, Final Fantasy, if you're familiar with Fire Emblem games, which I was very familiar, I was already ready for this, you know? It was something exciting, something new, something I wanted to do, and I know a lot of people can get turned away from turn-based combat, which is unfortunate, but I think that that's why maybe people had their drawbacks with this game in particular. The other thing about this game is that the characters, voice acting, everything was so well done. I mean, I just was blown away with the amount of story detail, character detail, again, the stylization, and don't even get me started on the freaking music. Oh my gosh. It's like they knew. It's like they knew that my entry into the Persona universe wouldn't have been more perfect if it hadn't been for P5's absolute banger of funk jazz fusion music. That's literally some of my favorite music to listen to. I love jazz, I love funk, I love neo soul, I love all of that, and it was everything and more, and I was just so blown out of the water by it. It was incredible. I remember thinking like, wow, these themes are very dark in the beginning of the game, obviously with Kamoshida and the whole thing of, you know, how he's abusing his students and how distorted desires become these giant palaces, and the creativity and the cognitive world and the metaverse. Like, there's so many things that I loved about this game. Moving forward, I would say the reason why I wish I could experience this game for the first time again is because I was just so surprised by just every aspect of it. I don't think there was ever a moment that I could predict what was going to happen next. And unfortunately, I think I did get a little spoiled, which, spoiler warning if you don't already know. I remember already kind of knowing about Akechi's betrayal, which kind of made me sad because I really wanted it to hit, you know, hard. And sometimes I do ruin surprises because I figure things out beforehand. Not like I try to, but sometimes it's just easy to figure out. It's not anybody's fault. I think some people are like that, genuinely, and I am one of those people who just happens to figure out things. It's how my brain is wired. But Akechi, to me, was such a complex character. Not only was he just really interesting to me from the get-go, but that whole pancake scene, I had no idea. Like, when that whole sequence of finding out who, you know, Akechi was and how he knew about personas and the metaverse and all this stuff, like how he knew about that, and they play that like little flashback scene, I literally was like, what? He knew the whole like it was such a great moment, just me in my bedroom just like freaking out over this thing that I just discovered, feeling like, oh my gosh, this is the craziest thing ever. And it's stuff like that I'll always miss, the feeling of it. It just I want to go back and experience it for the first time. The ending of the game came and you did a lot of like this stuff with your friends. You know, I'd never played a game with social links before. I was so worried, the pressure of having all these people and getting things right. I looked up a guide to get all the right questions and answers, and I remember I was like, man, I know this is probably cheating, but like, I just want to get everything right. I want to have the most like relationships, I want to have the most friendships, I want to have the most right answers for my freaking exam. Like all that stuff, right? and it was so much fun for me, and the vibes of the game were so comforting. And during that time of my life, I know that I was working a lot, but it brought me so much joy to play a game that not even my own brother knew anything about. No one knew about. It was almost like a one-on-one personal experience just for me. And I think that's why it made me feel so special. I had no people from the outside looking in, or anybody giving me opinions about the game or telling me how much they love the game. I got to decide on my own merit how much I truly enjoyed and loved the experience, and it was so special to me. It was extremely long.
Oh my god.
I mean, it was the longest game I'd played aside from, gosh, probably at that time, I would imagine the longest game was probably Breath of the Wild. It had to have been, at least. And it's just so precious to me. So precious. Kind of makes me a little emotional. It sounds kind of like silly, but it does genuinely make me emotional because there was like a time in my life where things just seemed so simple and linear, and so much has changed, you know? And I think that that's how I feel about playing new Persona titles, or even like the older Persona titles. When I played Royal for the first time, I was so excited. Oh my gosh. And I didn't even have to wait that long because I had already played the game a couple years after it released, so I didn't even have to wait much longer. At this point, my brother had moved away. He actually moved out of the country. So I had no access to his PS4, which was super sad. But I had saved up my own money. I ended up buying my own PS4. I felt so proud of myself for buying it with my own money, first of all. I set it up, you know, I got the Persona 5 Royal Edition metal copy, you know, they had the metal sleeve, and I got, you know, the special little wallpaper for my PS4, and it had all the cool sound effects for the buttons, and I just was so ecstatic. It was so fun, and I booted it up, and I was so excited. Literally so excited. I mean, I'm not much for replaying games all the time. If I really love a game, I'll replay it, but that's only few and far between. But I kid you not, like, I was so pumped. And what was really interesting was to see all the minute and little changes that were made from P5 to P5 Royal. Obviously, I knew that there was new content. I already looked up what I needed to do without seeing the spoilers. So I made sure to get my Maruki rank up, make sure Kasumi was up, which wasn't an issue for me because I loved both of the characters. I already knew that I wanted to romance Kasumi, and it was a no-brainer at that point. I mean, no offense. I loved her design and her character. By the way, for those of y'all who might have been wondering, I was a Haru lover in my first playthrough on P5 Vanilla, and let me tell ya, I didn't make it in time. I didn't know I had to have specific requirements to get her right, like you have to have a certain skill up, so I was a little late to that, so I definitely dropped the ball. But it's okay, I went on a date with Ryuji and it was great and I loved it.
For real?
But playing P5, seeing all the differences, seeing all the added things, it definitely made a huge difference in the game and made me love it even more. It became more crispy. It became like just the best thing ever. The saddest part was that I couldn't transfer any of my previous play save data, so I didn't get any of the special stuff that you would have gotten if you had a previous P5 vanilla save and then you know, played the new Royal version. I didn't get any of that stuff, which was so sad, but it's fine. It's all good. Like, you know, life goes on. Oh, hi, Kuma. But man, it was such an experience. I'll never forget it. It made me think so much. When a game truly makes you think about your own life and choices and what are you adding? What are you doing? How are you affecting others? How are you affecting yourself and your future self? When games start to make you think like that, it's almost like, wow, this narrative is no longer just a narrative, but it's teaching me something through it. And I think for myself, I had always struggled with isolation and depression, and even more in my recent adult years have struggled with anxiety. Playing a game like Persona 5 Royal, where there's so many choices and so many things you could do, so many mistakes you can make, and people did. There's still a chance for you, and there's still a way for you to make things right. Even though it's conflicting to see Akechi kind of get a quote-unquote second chance at life, but he doesn't want it because he wants whatever fate he was chosen to have. But at the same time, he wants what he wants to choose what fate he has. I think when you're given the option of what you choose to have, would you take the reality in which you're given a second chance, but it's not under your own terms or on your own terms? Or would you rather take your own fate in your hands and say, well, I made these decisions, so I should live with them? And that's a very complex thought for an anime game. I say anime game because it quite literally is, you're playing like an anime series, like legit. But man, I love this game so much. So much so that over there.
Hello there.
Maybe I'll show a picture of it later. But I have a signed copy of my metal P5 Royal case. I got it signed by Akechi's VO, Robbie Damon. I got Max Middleton, he's Ryuji's guy. And eventually, I'll get it signed by the rest of the cast at some point. I wish I could play Persona 5 for the first time. But I guess even though I can't do that, I'm gonna really love looking back on the memories and enjoy other people play it for the first time. And that is really fun for me too. I love seeing people's choices and reactions and how they interpret the story for themselves. I think it's very important that we all realize that everybody's story is different. And although we may not have the same perspective at times, that doesn't mean that we can't still come together and gush about the things that we love. You know, if we love the same things, it's, you know, why not? This is my love letter to Persona 5 to be specific. I'll never have this experience like I did, or again like I did, but who knows what other game will spark this joy for me. Who knows? Maybe there's a new game on the horizon that will give me the same feeling and satisfaction. But until then, I wish I could play Persona 5 for the first time again. Yeah.
Without a sign, without grasping it, the real question to be asked, where have I been?